This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan podcast.
What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. I am Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer of Dutchwood Football on 96.9 The Legend and all-rounder for Last Word college football. You are tuned in to the Phillip Jordan podcast. We got a fun show planned for you guys today. We have a guest interview on this Wednesday. I'll be joined by one of my longtime regulars here on the show, Bill Bender, national writer for the Sporting News. We will jump into a lot of college football topics. We'll get Bill's big surprise of the year, big disappointments of the year, other than Florida State. I know for everybody, especially down here in the Southeast, Florida State is probably the biggest disappointment out there, but Bill gives some of his as well. We'll jump into the ACC a little bit as well. We'll look back at Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt. What happened? What is Bill's opinion on that for Vanderbilt and for Alabama? We will look into some of the big matchups in college football this weekend. The biggest matchup in the country is outside of the Southeast, is going to be Ohio State traveling to take on Oregon in a Big Ten matchup. Still haven't got used to that with Oregon there, but that will be a big one in the Big Ten. Probably not the first time these two teams will play. We'll also get Bill's thoughts on the Oklahoma-Texas game. First time being an SEC game. A little weird. They're playing at 2:30, not the normal noontime kickoff. And also get his thoughts on LSU and Ole Miss. So that and much more on this edition of the Phillip Jordan podcast. You can check out the Phillip Jordan podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can also check out the show over at wiregrassdailynews.com. Also, the Facebook page. Please go like that if you are on Facebook. You can also watch the show over at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Now, let's jump into it with today's featured guest. All right, joining me on the show today is Bill Bender, national writer for the Sporting News. And Bill, appreciate you coming on the show. We had a wild Saturday this past week in college football. I don't think one that many people expected.
No, I certainly didn't. You know, with 5 top 11 teams going down, road upsets, something Vandy winning against top 5 teams for the first time in 61 attempts. Yeah, it was about crazy as it can be. There's no question.
It seems like that always happens, and we're always looking forward to, we're looking forward to this Saturday. And then, the Saturday after that on 19th, we've got some big matchups in the SEC, but it always seems like it's always the weekend you least expect when that stuff kind of happens.
I mean, obviously, this weekend coming up is big, and we thought this was going to be a table setter for that. But it showed. I don't know if the SEC has parity. Some would say, well, that just shows you can't have an off night in the SEC. I would argue more the latter, that it showed that maybe Alabama's not super elite, and Tennessee's not super elite, and when you have 8 one-loss teams in your conference, which they have, and only one unbeaten. There's a little bit of imbalance in that theory. So, fun. There's no doubt those SEC games were a lot of fun. And, as we get into these games, the next 2 weekends are absolutely loaded, and there should be plenty to write about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Looking at the season, after 6 weeks of the season, is there a team out there that's really surprised you that's a lot better than you thought they would be?
I think Miami, who has gotten a little bit of help. I don't know that we thought they'd be good, but I don't know if we thought they'd be in the top 5, or top 6. And, yeah, they've had a couple close shaves here the last couple weekends with Cal and Virginia Tech, and they even got some help from the referees along the way. But I think they've had a good season. SMU in the ACC is having a really good season as part of this realignment year where everything is new and different. And, for them to go out, despite that loss to BYU, they've really played well since they've turned the keys over to Kevin Jennings at quarterback.
Yeah, that was a team the last couple of weeks I've really been paying attention to, and I watched some of that game too when they played Louisville and went back and caught the extended highlights online, and just the difference. I mean, obviously he has, what you talk about Kevin Jennings, the ability to run the ball, and I mean he's tremendous throwing the ball. But I mean, what kind of different things have you seen with them since they've really went to him at quarterback that? I think a lot of people aren't talking about them. I think a lot of people look at Clemson and Miami as the favorites, which they should. But that team right there, it looks like they're kind of sneaking up on some people.
Well, Pitt's right there, too. Pitt's undefeated, and, Kevin Jennings, who's dual-threat quarterback, runs the ball well, and, they're playing with a little bit more tempo. And, yeah, they got a little bit of help from an overturned call last week. So it was an impressive win against Louisville. You look at their schedule, they're going to be a mix down the stretch. And Pitt, with Eli Holstein, the Alabama transfer, playing really good right now. So they're off to a 5-0 start. They haven't had one of those since the 1990s, and I think Pitt has emerged as a team that could definitely compete in the ACC here.
Yeah, and Clemson, I think a lot of people were writing them off after the Georgia game to start the season, and now you look at how they're performing. They're looking like Clemson of old.
Yeah, Clemson's fine, and that's in this new environment that we were talking about. You lose a game, and the end of the world, but it's not the end of the world for as long. Even places like Alabama, they lose to Vanderbilt, but they didn't fall out of any. I didn't see one playoff projection where they're out, so they're fine. Notre Dame loses to a MAC school at home, and all of a sudden they're back in the mix here. They're a top 15 team, so it is a new environment. I've struggled with that, to be honest with you. I've struggled with the idea that you can lose a game and not quite as devastating, but it does keep more fan bases involved, and that's how it's going to be as we get into October and November, because I think you're going to have a lot of 2- and 3-loss teams in the playoff mix.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be wild, especially when we get in November. Just playoff positioning, not just trying to get in that top 4. A lot more games are going to be meaningful. Obviously, I talked about the biggest surprise. Has there been a team out there that's kind of been like a big disappointment for you?
Yeah, well, Florida State's the easiest answer. That they're in a class by themselves, coming off the season opening loss, and it just hasn't gotten better. And, shocking for them to go out, double and lose, banking on the wrong quarterback, some problems with the defense, and just the bag keeps getting worse for them. So I don't think it means the end of Mike Norvell's job, but this is something you might see a little more often in college football, this idea that, okay, you can have this really good season followed by a really bad season. I mean, that's what's happened maybe over a longer span, maybe a 2-year arc with TCU. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing it with Michigan. Michigan lost a ton of talent to the NFL and won the national title, and they're not very good right now.
Yeah, it is wild, and then you add in just players coming in and out, transfers. You don't have that consistency with your roster that you used to have. So it's almost sometimes a lot of these teams are brand new when they come into a new year. I know I was just talking with some friends of sometimes we go into the season, we don't really know who these teams are because there's so many new faces on these rosters every year.
Correct, and you get into that, and it's one of those things where we'll see. I mean, and I think sometimes you get the best out of your players in the second year in the system. That's been proven across the country in places like Illinois, where Luke Altmaier and the Illini are ranked now. And it's not 100% accurate, but I would venture to guess that if you want the best out of a transfer quarterback, you get the best out of them in the second year in a system.
Looking at that Alabama-Vanderbilt game, I know when I messaged you last week about coming on the show, I was figuring we were just talking about how Alabama's played. They coming off Georgia win. Should have been a blowout win against Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt had different ideas on that, and they come out and Alabama couldn't stop them. And when you look at this game, is it more about what Vanderbilt was doing or what Alabama wasn't?
Probably both. In those cases, it's always both. I think Vanderbilt going 12 of 18 on third down was huge. Mm-hmm. Diego Pavia making huge plays here and there. And Alabama had a chance to get off the field late, maybe get a stop and go score and win the game and just get away with, we've been calling it a scare instead of a loss. But they couldn't do that. And I think that's a credit to Vanderbilt's offense and Pavia. They don't turn the ball over either. That was the other thing. Vanderbilt doesn't turn the ball over a lot, and that's gone a long way for them. Now, for Alabama, I still think they have a lot of things going right in their favor, starting with Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams, and a strong running game. But play some defense along the way, and their margin for error heading into that Tennessee game next week went down by a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing with Alabama, too. You look at the second half against Georgia, then that whole game against Vanderbilt, giving up 74 points, in those two games, and a lot of that second half against Georgia. I mean, you mentioned the defense there. Kane Womack, I mean, he's been a good coordinator in the past. Obviously, him and Kalen DeBoer have a history together. What are some things that you maybe saw in that Vanderbilt game from the Alabama defense that is concerning?
From the Alabama defense standpoint?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they can't get off the field on third down. I mean, that's what it is. They're giving up pass plays. They're having trouble with dual-threat quarterbacks. The whole thing with Malachi and that, and people tweeting that all week, bad optics. I mean, I don't know how much it matters in terms of, the big picture. I mean, that players get emotional, but I know that wouldn't have happened under Nick Saban. And I think now Kalen DeBoer runs into this problem where, that loss weighs more in Tuscaloosa than the win against Georgia. They expect to beat Georgia. They don't expect to ever lose to Vanderbilt, and I think that problem is something that's going to follow him. I hear that at Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman still hears about losses he'll hear about that loss to Northern Illinois like he will one against Marshall a few years ago. It's a bad loss.
Yeah, and I do think, and of course, I'm going to preface this that Auburn will have to deal with Diego Pavia, but teams from the state of Alabama will probably be glad when he's no longer playing college football, because everybody remembers what he did last year when he went to Auburn and they blew out Auburn last year, and Auburn was riding high last year. So I'm sure the teams in this state will probably be happy to see him graduate college.
Yeah, he played a nice game, and it's a nice moment for Vanderbilt. But again, I think we could pass it off and say, you can't have an off night in the SEC. I'm more the latter, where, maybe you're just not as good as you think you are. And I don't, the SEC still has the most playoff contenders, probably the most depth of any conference, but we can't sit here and act like going to Vanderbilt's a tough place to play. Come on. I mean, Nick Saban was right about that. They didn't play well enough to win is what happened. So maybe with the Arkansas-Tennessee upset, but still, if you're a top 5 team, you go out there and win that. And I think that's some of all these upsets last week. To me, I'm just looking at the teams that lose and say, maybe it's more about them just not being as good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we see some issues with these teams. They're not as great as they thought they were. Going into this week, obviously a bunch of big games. I know the biggest game of the weekend is Ohio State going to Oregon. Both teams 5-0. Right now, Ohio State's a 3-point favorite in that one. Look at these two quarterbacks, too, Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard. And that's where I wanted to go with that game. When you look at a big game like this, look at the quarterbacks. Which one of these two quarterbacks would you say you trust more in this big game?
Probably Will Howard, but who knows? I mean, this is Will Howard's first huge road test with Ohio State and all the things that they have. And Dylan Gabriel is at home. It's ironic on some level that Dylan Gabriel's playing in this game when last year he was in the Red River rivalry, which is as intense as any football game there is. So I think that's interesting to me, and we'll see how Dylan Gabriel does, but he's going to have to avoid the turnovers. He had a couple of those last week. For Will Howard, it's just playing with himself on the road against a really good Oregon football team, and Howard has more pressure on him because of the team he plays for. Ohio State's a lot like Alabama. They don't expect they're going out there expecting to win.
Yeah, in this matchup, people have brought this up, and throughout the year, really, with Oregon. Just how do you see them matching up front against Ohio State?
That's a big question, and that's what I'm most intrigued to see is how does this Ohio State offensive line that has improved under Chip Kelly and has been able to assert its will in the running game throughout the season, how do they respond to this active and fast and aggressive, violent Oregon defensive front, led by Jordan Burch, really good, by the way. So I think that's the matchup within the matchup. And as it so often does in a top 5 showdown, that's what you watch. You watch the offensive line on both sides. So we'll see how it goes. And, that'll be a big key for Oregon. On the other side, Oregon needs to run the ball with Jordan James against a very good Ohio State defense with veteran talent all over the place. Guys that are maybe not first-round NFL picks, but they got a lot of day 2 guys on that defense and a few day 1 guys like Caleb Downs that are going to make an impact in that game.
And real quickly, 2 SEC matchups coming up this Saturday are pretty big, too. Texas playing Oklahoma. Weird that these two are playing at 2:30 Central Time, not around noon like they normally do. But obviously with Oklahoma, really good defense. Offense, struggled. Michael Hawkins, the inexperienced quarterback, going against that Texas offense. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Do you see an avenue for an Oklahoma upset in this game?
Of course. It's Red River, and unexpected things happen all the time. That's one game where I think the spread looks high. Texas may very well go blow them out, whether it's Quinn or Arch or whatever. I mean, I saw them at the Michigan game, and they are very good. Oklahoma, Michael Hawkins Jr. quarterback. I like Oklahoma's defense, though. So we'll find out if that Danny Stutzman-led defense can force a few turnovers. I think 9 of the last 10 games have been 1-score games, and Oklahoma's won 5 of the last 6. So to think that they can't win that game would be a mistake.
Yeah, just don't throw it to the linebacker either. Auburn found that out the hard way when they lost that game a few weeks ago. And then Ole Miss and LSU, both teams with 1 loss. Feels like a really big game, especially Ole Miss just looking at their schedule. They need to get a win in Baton Rouge. Just what are your thoughts on that one?
Great game. It'll probably be wild. I mean, we used to call these elimination games. I don't know if that's the case anymore. It's a really big game and a really big spot for Ole Miss, who is favored, despite the fact that Brian Kelly doesn't lose often at home. You can trace that back to the LSU days or the Notre Dame days. He's really good at home. LSU's only lost 1 home game with Kelly as the head coach, and we'll see how that goes. But it's Jackson Dart, Trey Harris. I didn't read anything this morning. I've been kind of busy to see, what his status is. I know he's been banged up, but Trey Harris, the best receiver in the SEC. So if they can get that connection going, I anticipate a wild game. Either way, it's hard to pick, and that's one prediction that if you get it wrong, you're not too worried about because it's going to be a hell of a game.
Yeah, it definitely was last year when those two got together. And this weekend should be fun. And this has been fun as always, Bill, having you on the show, talking all things college football. If the listeners, viewers, everybody want to check out, where can they find you?
Yeah, always fun catching up with you, and we'll do it again as we get into November. But I'm at Bill Bender 92 at sportingnews.com. We have a ton of college football content for this. I know we didn't even mention K-State, Colorado. That's another game on the schedule with Dion and Travis Hunter and everything going on there. That's really good late-night entertainment. It's going to be a fun week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Bill, as always, appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Thank you.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows, like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits 106.7 KMX, Today's Country 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7, Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
High school football season, and that means the Dothan Wolves are back on 96.9 The Legend. Every Thursday night, check out the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show with Jerry Coleman and Ken Lambert as they sit down with Dothan Wolves head coach Jed Kennedy about the previous game and preview the upcoming opponent. If you missed the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show, you can check out the podcast at wiregrassdailynews.com or go to your favorite podcast catcher and just type in Dothan High School Football. And, of course, every Friday night, pregame starts at 6:45 and kickoff is at 7 for all the Dothan Wolves football action. All right, and once again, thanks to Bill Bender for coming on today's podcast. A lot of fun chatting it up with him about all things college football. We didn't get to that Colorado-Kansas State game, which should be a lot of fun late after 9 o'clock Central Time on Saturday night. So that should be a lot of fun, too, as well. Let's go quickly, a couple of news items, a couple of things that's happened over the last couple of days. And on Friday, we'll be dropping a picks podcast. We'll pick all the games, talk about it, all that good stuff. Not all the games, but you know what I mean. Let's look at it. Colby Young, Georgia wide receiver. He was arrested on Tuesday on battery and assault charges. Assault on an unborn child. And this comes from Mark Schlabach over at ESPN. He had an article up. Go check out the full. But it's just a couple excerpts from that. He said, according to an Athens, Clark County Police incident report obtained by ESPN, a 20-year-old woman who described herself as Young's ex-girlfriend told police that she went to his apartment around 12 a.m. Eastern Tuesday to discuss a relationship. When the conversation became heated after she discovered he was on the phone with another woman, the complaint said Young grabbed her left arm near her biceps and triceps and physically pulled her out of his room. The woman said Young was using derogatory terms and being demeaning of her. She said Young went back to his room and locked the door. The woman told police she started to collect her belongings when a friend called her home. When she answered, the woman told police that Mr. Young came out and grabbed her from behind. She said he then picked her up and began to squeeze her torso and abdomen very hard. She said she felt like Young was trying to harm her. The officer noted in the report that he observed a bruise and discoloration on the bottom of the woman's chest where it meets the abdomen and the redness on her right side. The police officer transported the woman to the Athens hospital for treatment. When the officer interviewed Young, he said he escorted a woman to his front door when the conversation became contentious and denied grabbing the woman. When the officer asked how the woman suffered injuries, Young said it wasn't for me. Colby Young was arrested last night after he asked his ex-girlfriend to leave his apartment. That's what Young's attorney said to ESPN, and also said he did not make physical contact with her in any way that could ever be considered a crime. Also said the attorney, I expect Mr. Young to be fully exonerated once our investigation is complete. Kirby Smart was asked about it. Well, he came out and started his press conference this week because I know you guys want to talk about the Colby, and I want to ask about it, but it's a pending legal matter, and he cannot ask any questions at the time, which, that's kind of to be expected in that situation. That's the thing with Georgia, a lot of success lately, but, and we've, obviously a lot of the stuff's been traffic incidents, stuff like that. But now another deal receiver. Remember, Ra Thomas was dismissed from the team, not due to something like this, but just legal issues. So we'll see what happens going forward with him. I would expect to be him on the field coming up in their next game, but we'll see what happens with that. We was talking with Bill Bender there too about the Alabama defense and their struggles. Well, Malachi Moore gave his take on that on Kane Womack and the defense. He goes, and this comes from CBS Sports. I think sometimes we get the call in a little late, so it gives us a little anxiety of not knowing what the offense is fixing to run or adjusting to their formations. He said, Coach Woda talking about Kane Womack, that's kind of a style of wanting to put us in the perfect position. So we're seeing finger pointing with Alabama defense, but they got some issues. They've given up 74 points these last two games, so Alabama's got to work on some stuff. We'll see how they do against South Carolina on Saturday, which they play at 11 o'clock over on ABC. So we'll see how that goes for the Tide in that one. And then some different news. Transfer portal window shortened for football and basketball from 45 to 30 days. This was also reported by CBS Sports. They are opting against eliminating the spring transfer window, which that was recommended according to the story by the Football Oversight Committee. But they are now going to go with football. The fall transfer window will be reduced from 30 to 20 days and will start on the day after the college football playoff field is announced. The post-spring window will go from 15 days to 10 days as part of the change. For men's and women's basketball, the window will open immediately after the second round of the NCAA tournament. Previously, the window would open the day after March Madness bracket was released. And unlike in fall and spring sports, they will only have one transfer window. And also, this has stayed unchanged. Any school that fires its coach will automatically trigger a separate 30-day transfer window. So that part stays the same as it has been. So we'll see. I know it's hard. It's just weird. You're having to re-recruit your guys while you're going through bowl games and also while you're going through playoff games. You would think nobody on a playoff team would do it, but we've seen it before. Players, maybe not starters, entered the portal getting ready for playoffs last year. The same thing with the NCAA tournament. You could hit the transfer portal while you're in the tournament while that's going on. So I just wish – I understand with football why they have to do it the way they do it, because got to remember, these are supposed to be college kids. So when they go into the portal, they got to get in class before the semester starts up in January. Obviously, someone that now is going back to school, I understand that part. And the basketball side of things, can we just wait until after the tournament's over for all this? I don't know. I still think we're far away from where we need to be with transfer portal NIL. And is this a step in the right direction? Reducing it maybe helps a little bit. It maybe speed up the process, but still, I think we're still far away from where we need to be. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Again, we'll be back for another Friday episode, probably a shorter episode, just giving you guys my picks and thoughts on the upcoming games. For this weekend, the big games, we'll go through all the SEC stuff, of course, and look at some select games throughout the country. I might throw some NFL picks in there as well. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those different places you listen to podcasts. Check me out on YouTube at Phillip Jordan Sports, and also over at Wiregrass Daily News. And you can always email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. Check out my written work, Last Word on College Football, as well. Anyways, hope everybody has a great Wednesday. Till next time. Bye-bye.